Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're headed to the Amazon basin to learn about the shocking world of electric eels. I'm sure a lot of you out there already know about how these eels can zap things, but today we're going to look at how these fish use that shocking ability to not only survive, but really thrive in their environment.
Yeah, it's really interesting because people hear electric eel and they think danger, high voltage. But there's so much more to it than just that.
Right. And before we get into all the details and the whys and hows of their electric powers, we should probably address the elephant in the room, or I guess the eel in the river. They aren't actually eels, are they?
Exactly. Electric eels are actually more closely related to catfish and belong to the knifefish family. And there are a lot of electric fish species out there, and many of them are called eels. But true electric eels, those are in a class of their own.
Okay, so there are a lot of fish out there that can produce electricity, but they can't all deliver that serious jolt like the electric eels that we're talking about today.
Right, only 3 species can actually generate those incredibly powerful electric shocks. There's Volta's electric eel, Vari's electric eel, and then, of course, the common electric eel.
Got it. So it's like this electric eel trifecta that can really pack a punch. But what makes them so different from those other electric fish? What makes them capable of generating that much power?
Well, their whole body is practically designed for it. Over 80% of an electric eel's body is dedicated to generating electricity. And they have these 3 specialized electric organs, the main organs, Sachs organ and Hunter's organ. And all of these organs are made up of thousands of specialized cells. They're called electrocytes.
Hold on, 80% of their body. That's wild. It's
Yeah.
crazy how important that electric ability is for their survival. So these electrocytes are the key to generating all that electricity.
They are, and it all comes down to a process called bioelectrogenesis. Basically, what happens is these electrocytes have this mechanism where they pump sodium ions out of the cell and potassium ions in. And what this does is it creates an electrochemical gradient across their cell membranes, which then results in a small voltage difference.
Okay, so I'm hearing that each one of these cells is like a tiny little battery storing up a small amount of voltage.
That's a great way to think about it. And when they're stimulated, thousands of these electrocytes discharge simultaneously, and so all those tiny voltages from each cell add up, and it creates a really powerful electric shock, which can be up to 860 volts.
860 volts. Wow, for our listeners out there, that's more than 3 times the voltage of a standard U.S. wall socket. I can see why electric eels have such a scary reputation.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to mess with that. And they've evolved some very clever ways to use this power, too.
Speaking of using their powers,
Hmm.
I've heard that they can actually use weak electric discharges to sense their environment.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They use a process called electrolocation, which is kind of similar to how bats use echolocation. So they emit these weak electric pulses, and then they analyze the distortions in the electric field that comes back to them. This lets them create a detailed image of their surroundings, even in murky water, so they can navigate and find hidden prey, even in complete darkness.
So they're swimming around with a built-in radar system. That makes a lot of sense because they live in the Amazon basin,
Right?
and those waters can be pretty murky.
Exactly. It's a crucial adaptation for them to be able to survive in that habitat.
All right, so we can't talk about electric eels without talking about how they hunt. They don't just use their shocks for defense,
Oh,
right?
definitely not. They have several clever hunting strategies that utilize their electric powers. So, for example, they can emit these short, high-voltage pulses, which cause nearby prey to twitch involuntarily.
So it's they're using electricity to flesh out their prey?
Exactly. The twitching gives away the location of the prey, so the eel can hunt them down. And sometimes what they do is they'll perform this curling maneuver. They wrap themselves around their prey, and then they deliver those electric shocks. And this maximizes the current that passes through the victim.
Wow, it's fascinating how they have all these special behaviors to use their electric abilities. It's really cool how an animal's body and their survival strategies are so connected.
Absolutely. It's a prime example of natural selection at work.
Yeah, and it reminds us that there's always more to learn with the natural world, right?
And it's not just for hunting. Either their electric shocks actually play a role in communication, especially during mating season.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I think I read something about that. So how does electricity work for finding a mate?
Well, basically, females seem to prefer males with lower frequency electric signals.
Really? So their electric signal is like a love song, but why is a lower frequency more attractive?
Well, scientists are still studying this, but one hypothesis is that a lower frequency signal might indicate a larger, stronger male, One that has more resources to be a good mate, like a signal of fitness.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's not just about, who can deliver the most powerful shock, but it's also about how they use their electric abilities for, like, I guess, more subtle communication.
Exactly. And this actually brings up another interesting point about their shocks. Despite their power, electric eels don't really seem to use them to kill humans.
I was just wondering about that. I mean, 860 volts sounds really dangerous. So why aren't we hearing stories of people, like, being electrocuted to death by electric eels?
Yeah, well, while there are rare cases of severe injuries, their primary use of those high voltage shocks really seems to be more for defense and stunning prey, not really for delivering a fatal blow.
So it's more like a don't mess with me warning rather than an outright attack.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's definitely a powerful deterrent. And most animals, including us humans, would be wise to heed that warning.
Okay, well, speaking of survival, there's another adaptation that makes electric eels pretty well suited to their environment. They can breathe air.
That's right. They've developed this really unique respiratory system that allows them to gulp air from the surface. And this is crucial for surviving in the Amazon because the water levels can fluctuate so much, and sometimes the oxygen levels in the water can become depleted.
So they're not just stuck in the deep water. They can go into, like, shallow, muddy areas where other fish might have trouble breathing.
Exactly, and that ability to breathe air gives them access to a wider range of habitats and food sources, which makes them even more successful predators.
It's crazy how all these adaptations work together. The electric organs, their hunting techniques, even their ability to breathe air, all of that stuff helps them thrive in such a challenging environment.
Absolutely. And their story is particularly interesting because it intersects with human history, too.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, indigenous people in South America have lived alongside electric eels for centuries.
I can imagine that makes for a rather cautious coexistence. How do they manage living with creatures that can deliver such powerful shocks?
Well, they've learned to respect the eels and their power. While there is a risk, especially for children, they've developed these traditional methods for dealing with them. So, for example, they might use long sticks or machetes to quickly dispatch eels if they pose a threat.
So it's like a balance of respect and caution.
Exactly. And interestingly, even though they share the same environment, and they know how dangerous these eels can be, indigenous people rarely consume electric eels.
Really? Why is that? I mean, I would have thought that a fish that big would be like a valuable food source.
Well, there are a couple reasons. First, their meat is considered pretty unappetizing. And maybe more importantly, there's always that risk of getting shocked during preparation.
Right. It's not worth risking a jolt of 860 volts just for a meal that's not even that tasty.
Exactly. It shows how cultural practices and ecological knowledge can influence how humans interact with the natural world.
That's true, and it also shows how we often underestimate the intelligence and resourcefulness of indigenous communities. They've figured out how to live in harmony with these incredible creatures,
Yeah.
respecting their power, but also protecting themselves.
Right. And, their long history of observing the eels has actually provided some valuable insights for scientists who are studying electric eels.
Now, speaking of science, I've heard that electric eels have actually played a role in some pretty big scientific discoveries. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely. Their ability to generate electricity has fascinated scientists for a really long time. And it's actually inspired some innovations in our understanding of electricity itself.
That's really cool. I had no idea that electric eels had such a connection to scientific advancement. Could you give us some examples?
Well, for example, Alessandro Volta, the inventor of the first electric battery, he actually drew inspiration from electric eels when he was developing his groundbreaking invention. He was really intrigued by their ability to generate and control electric current.
So you're saying that the electric eel played a role in the birth of the battery. That's amazing.
It's true, and his work was further built upon by Michael Faraday, who was another famous physicist, and he studied electric eels extensively, and his research on electric eels helped shape his groundbreaking work in electromagnetism, which then led to the development of electric motors and generators.
Wow. It's amazing to think that these creatures from the Amazon have had such a huge impact on human technology.
It really shows the power of observation and how the natural world and scientific discovery are so connected.
And the research on electric eels continues even today, right? What are scientists focusing on now?
Well, one of the most exciting areas of research is in the field of biomimicry.
Biomimicry. I've heard that term before. But can you remind our listeners what it means?
Sure, biomimicry is basically a process of drawing inspiration from nature to solve human problems.
So in this case, scientists are looking to electric eels for inspiration on
Yeah.
how to create new technologies.
Exactly. So, for example, researchers are exploring ways to mimic the electric eel's bioelectrogenesis process to create new types of batteries and energy storage devices.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. How would that work?
Well, imagine a battery that uses the same principles as the electric eel to generate electricity. And actually, in 2017, a team of researchers at the University of Freiburg in Switzerland, they actually developed a hydrogel battery that was inspired by the electric eel's electric organs.
A hydrogel battery. What is that?
It's a pretty cool concept. Essentially, they created a system that mimics that electrochemical gradient found in the eel's electrocytes. And they used hydrogels, which are these water-based polymers, to create an ionic gradient. And that generates a potential difference. And by stacking thousands of these hydrogel units together, they were able to produce a pretty substantial voltage.
So it's like a miniaturized version of the electric eel's electric organ.
Exactly. And while this is still in like the early stages of development, the potential applications are really huge. Imagine powering medical implants or wearable technology, using the same principles that allow electric eels to generate electricity.
That's amazing. It really opens up a whole new world of possibilities for sustainable and efficient energy solutions.
It does. And it all stems from observing and learning from the natural world.
It's incredible how something as seemingly simple as an electric eel can hold the key to such groundbreaking technological advancements. Yeah, it really does make you wonder what other innovations are out there,
Yeah.
just waiting for us to discover them. But looking to the natural world for inspiration.
That's what's so great about biomimicry. It never runs out of ideas and inspiration. And when it comes to electric eels, there's just so much that we still don't know.
So for those listening who might be thinking, okay, electric eels are cool and all, but like, how does this relate to me? What would you say to that?
Well, I think electric eels are a great example of how life can adapt and thrive, even in like the most difficult environments. They show us how powerful evolution is and how natural selection can lead to such incredible adaptations.
Right? It's like a reminder that even the weirdest or most dangerous creatures still have an important role to play in their ecosystems.
Exactly. And their story really emphasizes how interconnected all living things are. I mean, think about it. They've influenced indigenous cultures, inspired scientific discoveries. Electric eels have had a pretty surprising impact on human history and technology.
And it's all about being curious and paying attention to the world around us. I mean, who would have guessed that these creatures would help us develop better batteries or medical devices?
I know, it's really amazing. It just goes to show that we can learn so much from nature if we're willing to be open-minded and keep learning.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of electric eels, what would you say is the main takeaway for our listeners? What should we be thinking about?
Well, I think it would be to consider the potential of bio-inspired technologies. What if we could use the power of bioelectricity to create new medical devices or even wearable technology? Could we design energy-efficient systems that are just as efficient as the electric eel?
It's definitely a fascinating idea. Taking inspiration from nature to build a more sustainable future.
It is, and it all starts by appreciating the incredible diversity and ingenuity of life on Earth.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this electrifying journey into the world of electric eels. We hope you've all learned something new today, and we hope that you're feeling inspired to keep exploring the wonders of the natural world.